27 years ago, I purchased 50 acres of canyon land that nobody wanted. The real estate agent actually laughed when I signed the papers. The property was too remote, too rugged, too wild for most people. But that was precisely why I wanted it. The canyon walls rose 300 feet on either side of a meandering stream that swelled to a respectable river during spring melt. Ancient pine and oak trees clung to the slopes, their roots diving deep into the rocky soil for stability through centuries of seasonal weather cycles. I built my cabin by hand over 3 summers, using timber from my own land and stone from the stream bed. Not a large home by any standard, but it was mine, positioned perfectly to catch the morning sun as it filtered through the eastern ridge. My nearest neighbor lived 4 miles downstream, an arrangement that suited both of us perfectly. We would wave when passing on the county road, occasionally share tools or help with projects, but otherwise respected each other's privacy. The wildlife became my true companions. Deer drank from the stream each morning while hawks circled overhead. Families of raccoons would inspect my garden in the evening, and once I even spotted a mountain lion watching me from a high ledge, a rare privilege that left me breathless. I documented everything in journals and photographs, creating a record of seasonal changes and animal patterns that span decades. My background in environmental science was not wasted here. I cataloged plant species, tracked erosion patterns, and measured rainfall with scientific precision. The canyon had taught me its rhythms, showing me how water shaped the land with patient persistence. During heavy rains, I watched how the stream would swell dramatically, carving new channels before returning to its established course. The canyon was alive, constantly changing yet remarkably stable in its natural engineering. The first sign of trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning in early spring. I was splitting firewood when I heard vehicles coming up the access road, not the typical pickup trucks of locals, but the purring engines of luxury SUVs. 3 black Escalades parked near my property line. Men in expensive suits emerged, looking comically out of place against the rugged backdrop. They carried clipboards and surveying equipment, speaking in hushed tones while pointing at various features of the landscape. I approached them directly, wiping sawdust from my hands. "Can I help you, gentlemen? This is private property you are standing on." A tall man with silver hair and an artificial tan extended his hand. "Richard Harmon, Executive Director of Canyon Vista Properties. We are just conducting preliminary surveys of the area. Your property is not our focus, but rather the surrounding parcels." "Surrounding parcels?" I asked. "Most of that land belongs to the county or the Forest Service." Richard smiled, his teeth unnaturally white against his tan skin. "Not anymore. We have acquired nearly 2,000 acres of the canyon through a series of perfectly legal transactions. We are planning something truly special here." Over the next several weeks, more vehicles arrived. Surveying teams placed markers throughout the canyon. Heavy equipment began clearing access roads. Then came the official notice, an invitation to a community meeting at the county building to discuss the Canyon Vista Luxury Wilderness Retreat. I arrived early, securing a front-row seat as Richard Harmon unveiled a gleaming architectural model on the presentation table. The audience gasped audibly as he removed the cloth covering. There, in miniature perfection, was my canyon, except it was now dotted with dozens of massive cabins cascading down the slopes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard announced with theatrical flair, "I present to you the future of exclusive mountain living. 87 luxury wilderness retreats, each offering unparalleled privacy and natural immersion, yet with every modern convenience." My stomach clenched into a tight knot. 87 luxury cabins. In my canyon. My paradise was about to be interrupted in the most devastating way possible. The scale model sitting on the presentation table depicted a canyon I barely recognized. Where wild slopes once stood, terraced platforms now supported massive structures of glass and timber. The architectural renderings showed infinity pools overlooking the valley, helipads for private access, and a central clubhouse larger than the county courthouse. Each residence will range from 4,000 to 7,000 square feet, Richard continued, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of a career salesman. Prices begin at $2.1 million, with premium locations commanding substantially more. We have already received deposit commitments for 23 units. An older woman in the front row raised her hand. What about infrastructure? Our county roads can barely handle current traffic. Richard nodded as if he had anticipated the question. Excellent point. Canyon Vista Properties will be investing $12 million in road improvements, including widening the main access route. Additionally, we will establish our own private security force, medical response team, and facility maintenance staff. I studied the environmental impact statement they had distributed. The document was impressively thick, 170 pages of technical assessments, geological surveys, and water management plans. I took it home that night and began reading, my concern growing with each page. By morning, I had identified multiple critical issues. Their rainfall calculations used averages rather than accounting for the extreme precipitation events that occurred every decade or so. The soil retention plans failed to consider how the canyon's unusual mineral composition affected erosion patterns. Most alarmingly, they had completely miscalculated the watershed dynamics, ignoring how development on the upper slopes would funnel water toward the canyon floor. I prepared detailed notes and attended the follow-up community meeting the next week. When the public comment period began, I approached the microphone with my documentation in hand. My name is James Kellner. I have lived in this canyon for 27 years and have documented its environmental patterns extensively. These development plans contain serious flaws that could lead to catastrophic failures during heavy rainfall events. Richard Harmon sighed audibly. The county commissioner chairing the meeting checked his watch. I continued, pointing to specific sections of the report. On page 47, your hydrology assessment uses rainfall data from the Valley Weather Station, which receives 30% less precipitation than the canyon itself. On page 93, your soil stability calculations fail to account for the subsurface shale layer that becomes dangerously slick when saturated. Mr. Kellner, the commissioner interrupted, we appreciate your concerns, but Canyon Vista has hired professional engineers with proper credentials. No offense, but your amateur observations do not override their expert opinions. Amateur, I responded, my voice rising. I have a master's degree in environmental science and have published research on watershed management. A woman in an expensive suit stood up from the front row. I am Victoria Winters, president of the newly formed Canyon Vista Homeowners Association. While we respect local input, this project has been thoroughly vetted by county officials and professional engineers. These obstructionist tactics only delay progress that will bring substantial tax, revenue, and job opportunities to our community. The meeting continued, but my points were systematically dismissed or minimized. When the final vote came 3 weeks later, the county commission approved the development permits in a 4-1 decision. Construction permits were issued within days. As I left the county building, Victoria Winters approached me in the parking lot. Mr. Kellner, she said with a tight smile, I understand your attachment to the canyon. Change is difficult, but fighting this development is futile and, frankly, selfish. The economic benefits to the community are substantial. I looked her directly in the eyes. This is not about resisting change or economic benefits. This is about physical reality. You cannot ignore how water moves through that canyon during major storms. Nature does not care about property values or tax revenue. Victoria's smile hardened. We have spared no expense on engineering solutions. Perhaps your real concern is having neighbors after so many years of isolation. I assure you, our residents will be discreet and respectful. My concern, I replied, is that you are building luxury homes on land that will not support them during extreme weather events. When the rain comes, and it will come, those cabins will be in serious danger. She laughed dismissively. Our engineering team has designed for storms exceeding 100-year flood levels. Your doomsday predictions are unwarranted. As I watched her walk away, I knew that my battle had just begun. These were not just paper promises being broken, they were disasters waiting to happen. The destruction began on a Monday morning in early June. I awoke to the distant rumble of heavy machinery echoing through the canyon. By the time I hiked to the ridge overlooking the main development area, 5 bulldozers were already carving wide gashes into the pristine slopes. Ancient oak trees that had witnessed centuries of seasons toppled in seconds, their root systems yanked from the earth with mechanized efficiency. A bald eagle that had nested in the canyon for 6 years circled in confusion over its fallen nesting tree before flying away. I never saw it return. Within days, the familiar sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves were replaced by the constant growl of engines and the piercing beeps of vehicles in reverse. The scale of the operation was staggering. Dozens of workers swarmed across the canyon like ants, following the directions of foremen with blueprints and digital tablets. Entire hillsides were scraped bare, with topsoil pushed into enormous mounds. Natural drainage channels that had formed over thousands of years were filled in or diverted according to the engineered plans. I began documenting everything methodically. Each morning and evening, I photographed the changing landscape from consistent vantage points, creating a time-lapse record of the transformation. I measured rainfall and observed how water flowed across the newly altered terrain. Even minor showers caused concerning patterns, muddy rivulets forming where none had existed before, pooling water in areas designated for foundations. During one light rain, I photographed silt-laden runoff pouring directly into the stream, turning the normally clear water a turbid brown. Fish floated belly-up downstream. I filed reports with the County Environmental Office and the State Water Quality Board. Both sent inspectors who issued minor violations that resulted in small fines, negligible expenses for a multi-million-dollar development. Construction continued unabated. Roads carved switchbacks up canyon walls, supported by retaining structures that seemed inadequate for the steep terrain. Concrete foundations were poured directly into freshly cut shelves on the slopes, with minimal time allowed for the disturbed earth to settle. One evening, I encountered a construction worker at the local diner. Recognizing him from the site, I introduced myself and carefully steered the conversation toward working conditions. "Man, they are pushing us hard up there," he confided after establishing I was not associated with management. "Normal protocol is to let hillside cuts stabilize for at least 30 days before building retaining walls. They are giving us 3 days, then pouring concrete." "Is that safe?" I asked. He shrugged. "Not my call. The boss says the engineers signed off on it because they are using special fast-setting materials. But between you and me, I have seen corners being cut, drainage pipes installed at the wrong angles, retaining walls with inadequate footings. I have worked construction for 20 years, and I have never seen a project move this fast. I reported these issues to the county building inspector, who promised to investigate. 2 days later, I spotted him on site, sharing lunch and laughing with Richard Harmon in the project management trailer. No violations were issued. By August, the first structures began taking shape. The lower section of the canyon now featured 12 partially completed luxury cabins, their massive timber frames and expansive glass walls incongruous against the natural backdrop. Marketing materials appeared online, showing digitally rendered images of completed homes seamlessly integrated into pristine nature that no longer existed in those locations. I made one last attempt to raise the alarm, contacting several environmental organizations with my documentation. Most responded with form letters expressing concern but citing limited resources. One regional director agreed to meet me, reviewed my evidence, and shook his head sadly. "This is clearly problematic development," he acknowledged, "but they have followed the legal process, however flawed. The permits are issued. The environmental impact statements, though questionable, have been accepted by the relevant authorities. We simply do not have grounds for legal intervention unless they violate clear regulations." "What about when these structures fail?" I asked. "When the first major storm hits and these inadequate drainage systems collapse?" "Then there will be grounds for action," he replied grimly. "But by then, the damage will be done." As summer turned to fall, construction accelerated. Work crews operated in shifts, floodlights illuminating the canyon at night. The first cluster of homes neared completion, with landscapers bringing in non-native ornamental plants to surround structures that looked like they belonged in architectural magazines rather than a wilderness canyon. Each morning I woke to a landscape increasingly foreign to me. The animals had largely disappeared, seeking quieter territories. The natural contours of the land had been reshaped according to human design rather than geological principles. I watched helplessly as my beloved canyon was transformed, piece by piece, into an exclusive playground for the wealthy, built on foundations that ignored the fundamental forces that had shaped this land for millennia. September brought the completion of the first 23 luxury cabins. Canyon Vista Properties organized an elaborate grand opening ceremony, complete with catered champagne reception and live classical music echoing through the canyon. Luxury vehicles lined the newly paved access road as prospective buyers and local dignitaries toured the showcase properties. I watched from a distance as Richard Harmon cut a ceremonial ribbon stretched across the entrance to the model home, a 7,000 square foot monstrosity of glass and timber perched on a prominent ridge. Victoria Winters stood beside him, raising a champagne flute as photographers captured the moment for marketing materials. "Welcome to the future of luxury wilderness living," Richard announced to enthusiastic applause. "Where nature meets sophistication, where privacy meets community, where investment meets paradise." The irony was painful. The wilderness they celebrated had been systematically destroyed to create their exclusive enclave. The natural drainage systems that had maintained the canyon's stability for centuries had been replaced by engineered solutions that had yet to face their first serious test. That test came sooner than expected. Late September brought an early autumn storm system, not extraordinary by historical standards, but 3 days of steady rainfall that dropped nearly 4 inches on the canyon. I monitored the effects closely, hiking through mud to document how water moved across the altered landscape. The problems were immediately evident. Retention ponds overflowed their engineered boundaries. Culverts installed under the new roadways proved inadequate, causing water to flow across driving surfaces and erode their shoulders. Most concerning were the signs of soil movement on several of the steeper building sites, where dark, wet streaks indicated that subterranean water was finding paths beneath the foundations. Near cabin site 17, a section of decorative stone wall had separated from the main structure, creating a 6-inch gap where there should have been a seamless join. At cabin site 9, a portion of the backyard patio had dropped nearly 2 inches, creating a noticeable slope toward the house rather than away from it. I photographed everything, compiling a detailed report that I submitted to the county building department, the Canyon Vista HOA board, and the developer. Their responses came quickly and were remarkably similar in content. "Thank you for your concern," wrote the county building inspector. "Minor settlement is normal in new construction, particularly in areas with significant topographical variation. Our engineers have inspected the sites you referenced and determined that these are cosmetic issues that pose no structural concerns." The HOA response, signed by Victoria Winters, was more direct. "While we appreciate community input, please note that Canyon Vista employs professional engineers who monitor all aspects of our development. The issues you have documented are typical settling patterns that have been anticipated in our design. We would appreciate if you would direct future concerns through proper channels rather than creating unnecessary alarm." Despite these dismissals, maintenance crews appeared at the affected sites within days. They patched cracks, repositioned displaced stones, and resurfaced areas where erosion had occurred. Cosmetic solutions to structural problems. The first residents began moving in by early October. Luxury moving vans negotiated the canyon roads, delivering furniture and art to the newly occupied homes. Weekend traffic increased noticeably as owners arrived for short stays, their presence announced by the glow of lights across the canyon walls at night. I encountered one such couple while hiking near my property. They had parked their Range Rover at a scenic overlook and were taking photographs of the view. "Beautiful country," the man remarked when he saw me approaching on the trail. "We just closed on cabin 14 last week. Best investment we have ever made." "Congratulations," I replied. "Have you had a chance to inspect the property thoroughly since the recent rainfall?" The woman looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "There have been some drainage issues and ground settlement after even moderate rain. You might want to check your foundation and surrounding grade for any signs of water damage or soil movement." The man frowned. "Are you with the HOA?" "No, I have lived in this canyon for nearly 3 decades. I understand how water moves through this terrain." His expression shifted from curiosity to annoyance. "Well, we paid for comprehensive inspections before closing. Our place has been certified as exceeding all building codes." "Building codes do not always account for site-specific geological conditions," I explained. "This canyon has unique water flow patterns during heavy precipitation." "I think we will trust the professionals who designed and built our home," the woman interjected coolly. "The sales office mentioned there was a local who has been spreading concerns about the development. I assume that would be you." "I am simply sharing observations based on decades of experience with this specific environment," I replied. The man checked his watch, clearly eager to end the conversation. "Well, we have dinner reservations back in town. Enjoy your hike." As they walked away, I overheard the woman whispering, "That must be the crazy hermit Victoria warned us about, the one who opposed the development." This interaction became typical. New owners viewed me with suspicion, as if my concerns were motivated by resentment rather than legitimate environmental understanding. Several times I attempted to show residents the evidence I had gathered, only to be politely but firmly rebuffed. Meanwhile, construction continued on the remaining phases of the development. The middle and upper sections of the canyon were now dotted with partially completed structures, each more elaborate than the last. Marketing materials proudly announced that Phase 1 had completely sold out, with Phase 2 already 70% committed. As October progressed, more subtle signs of trouble emerged with each rainfall. Sinkholes appeared along the main access road where water found its way beneath the asphalt. The stream that ran through the canyon bottom began carving a new channel, threatening the elaborate footbridge that connected the community clubhouse to the hiking trails. I continued documenting everything, sending regular reports that were increasingly ignored. My reputation as the development's critic had solidified, making it easy for officials to dismiss my concerns as bias rather than science. All I could do was watch, document, and wait, knowing that eventually, nature would make my case more effectively than I ever could. The television meteorologist looked unusually serious as she gestured toward the swirling mass of colors on the weather map. "We are tracking what could be a historic weather system moving toward our region," she explained. "Current models show potential rainfall amounts of 15 to 20 inches over a 72-hour period, with the mountain regions possibly receiving even more due to orographic lift." I sat forward in my chair, calculating what this would mean for the canyon. 20 inches of rain would exceed any storm I had witnessed in my 27 years here. The meteorologist continued, her voice grave. "The National Weather Service has issued a flash flood watch for the following counties, effective tomorrow morning through Saturday evening." My county flashed red on the screen. Residents in low-lying areas and near waterways should prepare for possible evacuation. This system has already produced severe flooding in regions to our west. I immediately began preparations on my own property. Having built with the canyon's natural patterns in mind, my cabin sat on a natural rise, with carefully designed drainage channels directing water away from the foundation. Still, I inspected everything, cleaning gutters, checking the generator, securing anything that could become dangerous in high winds. Then I turned my attention to warning others. I drove to the Canyon Vista Clubhouse and requested to speak with Victoria Winters or any available HOA board member. The receptionist regarded me with thinly veiled suspicion. "Ms. Winters is in a meeting. May I ask what this is regarding?" "The approaching storm system," I replied. "The Weather Service is predicting potentially historic rainfall amounts. Given the drainage issues that have already appeared with much smaller rain events, I believe emergency measures should be implemented immediately." She made a phone call, speaking in hushed tones while occasionally glancing in my direction. After a brief conversation, she hung up and smiled tightly. "Ms. Winters says the HOA has already been briefed by their weather consultant. They have a comprehensive severe weather plan in place and do not require outside input at this time." "This is not about input," I insisted. "This is about safety. Residents should be advised to evacuate before road access potentially becomes compromised." "Sir, our weather consultant believes the storm will track further north than initially predicted. While we appreciate your concern, we have professionals monitoring the situation." I left a printed copy of the Weather Service warning along with my contact information, knowing it would likely be discarded. Next, I attempted to warn individual homeowners, going door to door among the occupied cabins. Most were weekend residences and stood empty. Those owners who were present responded with varying degrees of politeness, but universal dismissal of my concerns. The HOA sent an email about the storm, one woman explained. They are taking some precautionary measures, but said there is no cause for alarm. These houses were built to withstand extreme weather. By evening, I had reached perhaps a dozen residents, with no evidence that any were taking the threat seriously. Frustrated, I made one final attempt, an emergency request to address the HOA board, which I knew was meeting that night to discuss the storm preparations. I arrived at the clubhouse to find the parking lot full. Inside, Victoria Winters was addressing a room of concerned homeowners. As I have explained, she was saying, our engineering team has assessed the situation and assured us that our drainage systems are rated for rainfall events exceeding what is currently forecast. We have maintenance crews on standby to address any isolated issues that may arise. I stood at the back of the room, waiting for an opportunity to speak. When Victoria opened the floor for questions, I raised my hand. She pointedly looked past me, calling on other attendees. Finally, when no other hands remained raised, she reluctantly acknowledged me. Mr. Kellner, I presume you have concerns to share. I do, I said, stepping forward. The National Weather Service is predicting potentially catastrophic rainfall amounts. The drainage systems in this development have shown failure points during even minor rain events. I strongly urge the HOA to recommend evacuation before road access potentially becomes compromised. Murmurs spread through the room. Victoria quickly regained control. Mr. Kellner has been a vocal critic of our community since its inception, she told the assembled homeowners. While we respect his long residency in the canyon, his assessments contradict those of our certified engineering team. A man in an expensive suit stood up. I am Robert Claiborne with Horizon Engineering. We designed the water management systems for Canyon Vista specifically to handle extreme precipitation events. Our models indicate that even with the forecast rainfall, the system will function within parameters. Your models are flawed, I responded. They do not account for the unique geological features of this canyon or the cumulative effect of development on the upper slopes. Victoria interjected smoothly. We appreciate your input, Mr. Kellner, but we will defer to our credentialed experts. Now, if there are no further questions, we will proceed with our preparedness briefing. I left the meeting knowing I had done everything possible to warn them. Back at my cabin, I made final preparations as the first raindrops began falling. By midnight, the sound on my metal roof had intensified to a steady drumming. I sat on my covered porch, watching the dark shapes of clouds racing across patches of night sky, listening to the wind rising to a moan between the canyon walls. The storm had arrived, and with it the inevitable reckoning. By dawn, the rain had been falling steadily for 8 hours. 6 inches had already accumulated in my rain gauge, with the heaviest bands of the storm yet to arrive. The stream that normally meandered through the canyon bottom had transformed into a churning brown torrent, carrying branches and debris at alarming speed. I had slept little, rising frequently to check conditions and monitor emergency radio channels. The county had issued flash flood warnings for all canyon areas, but no evacuation orders had yet been announced for Canyon Vista. From my vantage point, I could see lights on in several of the luxury cabins, residents either unaware of or unconcerned about the danger building around them. The first structural failure occurred just after 7:00 a.m. I was scanning the development through binoculars when I saw a section of retaining wall behind cabin site 32 suddenly bulge outward, then collapse in a muddy surge. The earth behind it, saturated beyond capacity, flowed like thick liquid down the slope, carrying small trees and landscaping features toward the house below. I immediately called emergency services. 911, what is your emergency? This is James Kellner in Reed Rock Canyon. A retaining wall has failed in the Canyon Vista development. There is an active mudslide threatening occupied structures. We have units responding to multiple incidents in the area, sir. Is anyone injured or in immediate danger? Not yet, but several homes are directly in the path of moving earth. You need to order an evacuation immediately. Sir, evacuation orders come from the Emergency Management Office. I will relay your report. As I watched, the mud flow reached the back deck of cabin 28, lifting one corner and splintering the wooden structure. Lights came on inside the house as the occupants became aware of the danger. Minutes later, I saw figures rushing to a vehicle parked outside, throwing belongings inside before speeding down the access road. The rain intensified. The weather radar on my phone showed the heaviest band of precipitation now directly over the canyon, with another 6 to 8 hours of similar intensity expected. Water flowed down every slope, not in established channels but in sheets, saturating soil that had already reached its absorption capacity. At 8:17 a.m. a catastrophic failure occurred. Through the gray curtain of rainfall, I saw a massive section of the North Canyon wall give way. Thousands of tons of mud and rock slid downward in terrible slow motion, engulfing 3 partially constructed cabins in the upper development phase. The sound reached me seconds later, a deep rumbling like distant thunder, but continuous and growing. Emergency sirens finally began wailing through the canyon. My phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Immediate mandatory evacuation, 4 Canyon Vista estates and surrounding areas. Life-threatening flash flooding and landslides occurring. Too late, I thought. The main access road was already compromised in multiple locations. As I watched, a section approximately half a mile from the development entrance collapsed entirely, sliding into the canyon below and taking a guardrail and part of the pavement with it. Anyone still inside the development would now be trapped until the storm passed. My phone rang, a number I did not recognize. Hello, Mr. Kellner. This is Robert Claiborne from Horizon Engineering. His voice sounded strained, the professional confidence from yesterday's meeting replaced by barely controlled panic. We have a situation developing at Canyon Vista. The drainage systems are failing catastrophically. The retention ponds have overtopped their barriers. Where are you now? I asked. At the clubhouse with Ms. Winters and approximately 30 residents who cannot evacuate due to road conditions. We have lost power, and the emergency generator is functioning at reduced capacity. The clubhouse is built on the lowest point in the canyon, I said. You need to move everyone to higher ground immediately. Ms. Winters asked me to inquire if you would be willing to guide us to a safer location. You know this canyon better than anyone. The irony might have been satisfying under different circumstances. The safest approach would be to move everyone to the Northern Ridge Trail. It follows the highest ground out of the canyon. Do you have adequate vehicles? We have several SUVs and a maintenance truck. Get everyone moving now. Take Highway Channel Road to the fire service trail marked with blue blazes. Follow it to the ridge. I will meet you at the trailhead. I gathered emergency supplies and rain gear, then headed out into the deluge. The rain hit with physical force, driven by wind that had intensified to near gale force. Visibility was reduced to mere yards. The ground beneath my feet felt unnaturally soft, saturated to the point of instability. I had covered perhaps half the distance to the meeting point when I heard it, a sound like nothing I had experienced before. A deep, wrenching groan followed by sharp cracks of timber under extreme stress. Through a momentary break in the rainfall, I saw the first cabin tear free from its foundation. The structure was Cabin 17, one of the showcase properties perched on an artificially graded shelf halfway up the canyon wall. The earth beneath it had liquefied, causing the entire building to shift, then slide. The movement started slowly, almost imperceptibly, then accelerated as gravity took hold. The 7,000 square foot luxury home rotated slightly as it moved, its massive glass windows reflecting the gray storm light in surreal flashes. When it hit the first obstacle, a partially constructed cabin in the tier below, both structures broke apart with explosive force. Timber beams snapped like matchsticks. Glass shattered into dangerous shards. The combined mass continued downward, gathering speed and debris, finally reaching the swollen stream at the canyon bottom. But what happened next defied expectation. Rather than breaking apart completely on impact, the core structure of the cabin remained partially intact, buoyant enough to be caught by the powerful current. Like some nightmarish houseboat, the million-dollar structure began floating downstream, occasionally spinning in the current before smashing into canyon walls or other debris. As I watched, transfixed by the surreal spectacle, more slope failures began triggering throughout the development. A domino effect of catastrophic engineering failures, each one releasing more water and debris to impact structures below. From my vantage point, I could see at least 5 cabins in various stages of structural collapse, with several more showing ominous signs of imminent failure. Through the driving rain came the sound of helicopter rotors. Emergency services had dispatched air rescue, but the conditions made approach dangerous if not impossible. The aircraft circled at a distance, unable to reach those stranded by the rapidly deteriorating conditions. My phone rang again. Robert Claiborne. "We cannot reach the trailhead," he shouted over the background noise of panicked voices and pounding rain. "The road has washed out completely. We are redirecting to the Eastern Maintenance Building. It sits on a concrete pad on relatively higher ground." "That building was not designed as a shelter," I warned. "How many people are with you?" 27. We lost contact with residents in the upper cabins. Some refused to leave their properties. "Stay where you are. I will come to you. The maintenance building is not safe." I altered my course, now moving directly into the heart of the unfolding disaster. Around me, the canyon I had loved for nearly 3 decades was being reshaped by water and gravity, forces that had always ruled here, temporarily held at bay by human engineering that had finally, catastrophically failed. 3 days later, when the rain finally stopped and the floodwaters began to recede, the full extent of the devastation became clear. Of the 87 planned luxury cabins, 34 had been completed or nearly completed before the storm. Of those, 29 were completely destroyed, either collapsed in landslides, washed away by floodwaters, or so structurally compromised that they would require demolition. The remaining 5 suffered severe damage but remained at least partially intact. The human toll was sobering. Through a combination of good fortune and last-minute evacuations, there had been no fatalities, but 17 people required rescue by emergency services once conditions permitted helicopter access. 3 residents suffered serious injuries, including Robert Claiborne, who had been struck by debris while helping others reach higher ground. The canyon itself was transformed. New channels had been carved where none existed before. Massive deposits of sediment and debris created unnatural formations on the canyon floor. The access road was destroyed in 12 different locations, making the development inaccessible except by foot or air. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing footage that soon appeared on national broadcasts. Luxury development destroyed in historic flooding became the headline story across multiple networks. Environmental experts were interviewed, most confirming what I had warned about for 2 years, that the development had fundamentally destabilized the natural drainage and soil retention systems of the canyon. Victoria Winters was conspicuously absent from public view, but Richard Harmon appeared briefly at a press conference, reading a prepared statement. Canyon Vista Properties extends our deepest sympathies to all